Airlines Confidential with Scott McCartney is made possible with support from Pratt & Whitney, committed to working smarter, cleaner, and greener today for a more sustainable tomorrow. PrattWhitney.com. Infinity Flight, the leader in Cadet Academy flight training programs. InfinityFlight.com. Ontario International Airport in Southern California. SoCal So Easy. And by Cirium, the world's most trusted source of aviation analytics, Cirium.com. We also welcome your business's support. Contact us at airlinesconfidential.com.
Welcome to the Thanksgiving episode of Airlines Confidential. I'm Scott McCartney, and I'm taking a break from my cranberry cooking to record this with Dave Hilfman. Welcome back, Dave. You won't be the first to call me a turkey this Thanksgiving. In fact, we have a listener letter doing much the same that we'll get to later in the show. But you, my friend, are the turducken of podcast guest hosts, a host who can appeal to many different tastes. Happy Thanksgiving, Dave.
Thanks, Scott. Great to be back on. Love being the turducken of Airlines Confidential. I mean, I feel a little like John Madden of airline podcasting, which I would take as a great honor. But hey, happy Thanksgiving to you, Scott, and your family, and to all the amazing fans and listeners of Airlines Confidential worldwide. You know, it's such a busy season for the industry. It's always worth taking a moment to thank everyone throughout this travel industry, airlines specifically, of course, from our perspective, but really the whole travel industry for what they do. I mean, Thanksgiving shows just how incredible and important this industry is, bringing millions of families and friends together all around the world. So, in fact, Scott, I heard from an old colleague and friend of mine, a guy named Bob Schumacher. You probably met him. He was Continental and United guy over in the UK. Kind of notorious, legendary, just great guy. And he had listened to one of the previous podcasts. One of his kids is down in Byron Bay, and it's one we did earlier this year from when I was down in Australia. So anyway, it's just great to know the impact of this show and how many people it reaches. And so obviously, congrats again to you on making this happen every week and all these great co-hosts you've got and the guest. And geez, I heard my old big boss on, both of them, I guess, last week, Mr. Kirby, along with Oscar Munoz, and you've had a lot of great folks.
It's been so much fun.
Yeah, I know.
I appreciate you and all of the guest co-hosts who have kept this going. It's really been terrific. You brought so much to it. Thank you.
Well, thanks for that. And I know it just, we talk amongst the guest host, and I think we all feel really privileged to be a part of this. And I know Ben's been brought up a number of times and just recognition, certainly during this time of year. You think of your friends that are here and also departed, and he's the GOAT emeritus. I think you're the GOAT now, but he created everything. So I did want to shout out to him, and I know Marcia and family. And anyway, it's just fun to see what this program means to so many. And we talked about this industry is a family in many ways, and people develop lifelong friendships. And I just can't tell you how many people I hear about who listen to this show and will send me a text or an email. And anyway, it means a lot.
That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, and talking about, this upcoming Thanksgiving holiday season, it looks like there are a record 31 million people are expected to fly this Thanksgiving over the 11-day peak travel period, up slightly from last year. The FAA expects to handle 360,000 flights. So everybody's going to be a bit busy. Let's hope those projections hold. There was some evidence that the shutdown and all the bad publicity on flight cancellation, delays, long TSA lines, that maybe it was weakening demand for holiday tickets. Hoping the demand rebounded with, the shutdown behind us and all of our great air traffic controllers and the TSA agents and folks working security, with all them back in position and doing their things. Hopefully we'll really set some good records. Hopefully, of course, we get good weather, calm air, very little turbulence for folks out there. And well-behaved passengers out there.
Yes, absolutely. Well, speaking of well-behaved passengers, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy put out a public service announcement urging Thanksgiving travelers and beyond to, quote, dress with respect, quote, to bring civility back to airports. The PSA has pictures of travelers in suits and hats and Frank Sinatra singing Come Fly With Me, which was released in 1958. And I kind of wonder if they paid for the rights to that. I know the Sinatra family's careful with that. But Frank's playing in the background. Secretary Duffy said at the end of the spot, "The golden age of travel begins with you."
Did Duffy sing that song at all? Did he actually sing it?
No.
I keep thinking of what was it? Catch Me If You Can. Wasn't that the big song on that movie? Come fly with me, fly away. It was, right?
Yeah, it's right.
I know people confuse you and I with Leonardo DiCaprio. Anyway, sorry, I digress. But every time I see and hear about that song, it just brings me back to that movie. So what was the issue? What did he was putting on the fact that he said, you got to look good?
Yeah, you got to look good. He said, don't show up in your pajamas. And the public service announcement, I don't know if it'll get any airplay or not, but it has every clip in the world of disruptive passengers, fistfights in the cabin and, all that kind of stuff. I think some of it's not from the United States, but be that as it may, we certainly have had disruptive passengers. There was a huge increase of the pandemic. There were flight attendant injuries. A lot of people got charged with federal crimes out of that. It is a serious issue. I'm not sure, wearing a black suit, white shirt, black tie like 1960s Mad Men advertising execs is going to make the skies more friendly. But there was a very nattily dressed Secretary Duffy saying, no more pajamas. I bring up this issue a lot because I think it's a much bigger issue and much more important issue, and also a much more difficult issue. But when Secretary Duffy says the golden age of travel begins with you, I would say, actually, no, Secretary Duffy, the golden age of travel begins with you, begins with him. Because what would make travel more civil and enjoyable and respectful would be for the Department of Transportation to solve its air traffic control staffing shortage and bring its equipment out of the 1950s. The equipment fits right into this whole Mad Men theme. So rather than asking travelers to dress like Fox TV hosts, let's fix the concrete problems that lead to delays and cancellations and frustrations and really make it unpleasant. It's all a bit ironic because this comes after the secretary had a rather uncivil social media spat with his predecessor, Pete Buttigieg, after Secretary Pete slammed the president for criticizing air traffic controllers during the shutdown. Secretary Sean accused Secretary Pete of basically being AWOL in the transportation department. And Secretary Sean said he spends his days cleaning up Buttigieg's messes. It was nasty. Ouch. What happened to his call for saying please and thank you? Personally, I think we've had a string of transportation secretaries who are more interested in their own TV appearances than they are in fixing the transportation system. And the system is suffering because of it. Longtime listeners know I was very critical of Secretary Pete for not addressing the air traffic control situation. Pete Buttigieg made beating up airlines his focus, not fixing his own shop. And a lot of his action on airline issues came very late in his term. There were 3 lost years in there. Longtime readers know I was very critical of his predecessor, Elaine Chao, who did nothing to address the air traffic control situation and left travelers in the lurch when airlines illegally refused to refund customer tickets in the pandemic or baited customers into taking vouchers they'd never use because of short expiration dates rather than cash refunds. All of that was against U.S. regulations. She did very little. next to nothing to enforce that. Personally, I don't think we've had a transportation-minded transportation secretary since Ray LaHood. I have hopes that Sean Duffy and FAA Administrator Brian Bedford with him can make progress on fixing the biggest single problem, making travel more expensive and less civil. But it's not by getting basic economy ticket holders to wear starched white shirts. Let's see if Sean Duffy is a turkey or a peacock at the end of his 4-year term. But as I said about Secretary Pete, get your own house in order before you start criticizing others. Dave, you'd never wear your pajamas to the airport, but do you think a dress code would improve air travel? Maybe airlines should charge a fee to put your bare feet on the bulkhead, as people do in disgusting ways.
I would like to go on record, Scott. When I do wear my pajamas to the airport, it's only my silk pajamas. I buff it up. I also have seen some extraordinary bare feet activity on not only the bulkhead seats, but others. And I'm always trying to find a way to nicely, very civilly indicate, listen, by the way, we love your business. I love seeing customers filling all those seats on every airline around the world, wherever you're going. But it should be noted, you're not sitting in your own living room or for that matter, maybe in your bedroom or your bathroom. So I will say, if nothing else, maybe there'll be some positive impact, maybe just a little spin, some people commenting in other shows, newspaper articles, maybe even, I think maybe I saw a couple things on TV following that announcement from Secretary Duffy about maybe civil behavior and looking better. Like you said, not going to fix the problem universally. The most important thing, as we know, is air traffic control modernization and staffing levels and all the things that we have talked about on these podcasts, over the years. But I actually didn't think it was a bad thing he mentioned it. It was a little bit comedic. And, from a dress code perspective, for those of us, and there's, so many of your listeners from the airline industry, or, if they either retired or still working very actively. But if the ones from the early days, we had those dress codes, suit and tie, right? Suits, ties, and dresses. I would never.
For employees who were non-revving, right?
Yes, the non-rev employee. Yeah. I was so scared to show up at the airport without anything but a suit or tie. Even in my casual stuff, I'd have to put a blazer on. So anyway, I know people in the industry had to be laughing a little bit about that because that's how it always was. But for sure, I'd love to give my soapbox and talk again about what the secretary could do and what you've mentioned many times. Why don't we get focused on privatizing ATC? Let's get the most reliable budgeting and capital expenditures lined up. We can buy the best hardware and software. I know we got a good head start with the last budget battle on getting some funding, but there's so much more to do. That's what I think maybe the secretary should be doing, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, let's hope for the best, pal. It is Thanksgiving. Yeah. We can be thankful for what we've got so far, and hopefully we'll see even better things ahead in money and operations and peace on the home front in the air traffic control.
And we are. And, by the way, we are very thankful. And, we could do a whole show and it might be a good idea. Let me know. A whole show on what was the golden age of travel. Because let's bring back the golden age of travel. Well, people think of the golden age of travel as the 60s and 70s when the business was regulated. It was very expensive and basically the exclusive domain of wealthy white folks traveling. It was not the all-encompassing transportation system that we have now, where you can get on a plane and go just about anywhere nonstop. It was not nearly as safe as it is today. It was not nearly as convenient. When in the regulated days, you had to kind of hopscotch across the country on the lines that airlines were assigned. You didn't have the the robust flight schedules that we have today. So a lot of things that I think you look back and say, well, yeah, maybe on the 747 there was a piano bar, but that didn't last very long either. I just think in many ways this is now the golden age of travel because it is cheap and ubiquitous and important and fosters a global economy and allows us to go to, just about anywhere nonstop. And we do go, and people, hundreds and hundreds of millions of people are traveling. And that's exactly what you want. How other people are dressed on the airplane, I could care less. I just want to go somewhere. And I have now, which I think helps with the golden age argument, I have the opportunity to buy up to exactly the comfort that I want, that I'm willing to pay for. And yeah, maybe it was all quote unquote free in the past if you were lucky enough to be in first class or upgraded or whatever. But we all paid for it one way or another. And that was basically in higher ticket prices across the board.
You said it beautifully, Scott, and I happen to agree. The golden age of travel is now, and it's for all those reasons you mentioned. I mean, the access we have worldwide, the places, I mean, the quality of the product across all carriers and getting only better. I do realize that the, romantic notions of the past, they were great. Call it the Pan Am, the TWA, the Eastern, right?
Yeah.
All the days of the past. A lot of that's because, hey, when you had 50% load factors, it was a lot more comfortable traveling, be it up front or in the main cabin. And you do look back and people flying around and having, Chateaubriand and all that. But that is such a, it's just kind of thinking back on Camelot, right? I mean, back then, at the time, they probably didn't think any of that. It was just, it was what it was. And you always get now just a different perspective based on, kind of what you're dealing with at the time. But I do think now is the best time ever. And it is only getting better. And it will get better because of all the improvements that, are being made in the system, certainly in the airline side of it with people, new fleets, new facilities. I mean, geez, just got a new terminal here in San Diego. And I know there's, Pittsburgh, Christine talks about that's supposed to be amazing and all the other stuff. So it is, it's just, I guess just we need to keep watching if the governments around the world, and particularly in the U.S., will do what they need to on these infrastructure issues, which, again, don't have to beat dead horse. But, I mean, by far, what Scott Kirby talked about and others, I mean, getting this air traffic control system fully up to speed and with fully staffed, I mean, that would be the single best thing to happen to everybody because I think everybody else is spending. And to that end, sure you saw we have the orders continued to fly, no pun intended, or maybe that was pun intended, at the Dubai Air Show with the Gulf region airlines ordering more than 400 airplanes from Airbus and Boeing. It's just stunning to watch year after year.
Yeah, no, and it certainly makes the infrastructure argument you were talking about. Air travel is going to double over the next 20 years or whatever the projections are.
Growth and the quality, right?
Yeah.
It was talking about the orders. So again, I mean, you just incremental progress on every facet of this industry, and the fleet's the probably the most important because you get all those customer amenities, which is so critical, and the efficiencies that the airlines are looking for, and all the technology. It's just great. Anyway, the orders between Airbus and Boeing were kind of evenly split. Airbus had more aircraft ordered in total, but a lot of them were the A321neo narrow-body jets. Obviously, they're fabulous. Boeing, however, scored a lot more of the wide-body orders. I'd say the higher margin airplanes, so to speak.
Right.
Probably more profitable, I suspect. I know. Mostly for the new 777-9, its newest wide-body. Of course, the 777-9 is in flight test, and deliveries aren't expected to begin for a couple years still. But what's most interesting out of all of this is the continued enthusiasm, no doubt the oil-funded enthusiasm for the Gulf State Airlines to continue to grow and expand. So if all of these airplanes do get delivered, they will be more and more of a challenge to our friends in the U.S. and European airline industry in the long haul markets.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just kind of amazing to see all that they continue to do in order. It's obviously good for the manufacturers. And Scott, JetBlue CEO Joanna Geraghty was in the news again this week. She said the government should, quote, provide a level playing field that would allow smaller airlines to compete more effectively with the four major U.S. carriers that control around 8% of the market. With the Justice Department under the Biden administration forcing JetBlue to unwind its Northeast Alliance partnership with American Airlines and blocking its proposed merger with Spirit Airlines, the New York-based carrier has struggled to reach the scale needed to compete. That has contributed to a 6-year streak of unprofitability, according to Ms. Geraghty. So, JetBlue, fine carrier, doing a lot, making a lot of changes. Marty St. George over there. What do you think, Scott? Do you agree with Ms. Geraghty? Is it the government's fault at what's going on at JetBlue?
Well, I think she kind of uniquely has a good point. I think the government hadn't done JetBlue any favors. Since it gave JetBlue a whole bunch of New York Kennedy Airport slots so it could get off the ground 25 years ago. And by the way, that was a big favor.
Yes.
To me, the big blow was the Northeast Alliance. You have American, which is losing ground to both United and Delta in the Northeast, teaming with JetBlue, which is losing ground to bigger airlines. And the two of them said the alliance was really benefiting both. So they both needed it. And they would seem to be exactly the competitors who, should be allowed to team up and become more effective competition for the two bigger airlines. But the government killed it. So now JetBlue is in an alliance with United. That's one of the big carriers that you're concerned about. It's not as comprehensive a deal with United, but it will benefit United, and that's not the competitive response that would make the most sense if you're worried about market domination in the Northeast. And then the government getting the Spirit acquisition killed in court. In hindsight, look, we'll never know. Maybe that was ultimately a good thing for JetBlue, or maybe not. There's no doubt JetBlue would have renegotiated the terms if there was court approval to proceed. So the whole thing might have fallen apart anyway. But what we know for sure is that JetBlue does need to get bigger, and Spirit obviously can't survive on its own as it is now. We know that too. Now, you could argue we didn't know that when the court ruling happened, but we certainly probably should have. They certainly hadn't, made money in, 4 years. Now it's 6 years or 5 years or whatever. The merger was out of necessity, not just for thrills. So what was the government protecting? It turns out the government was protecting the dominance of the big four. In terms of day-to-day help, I think the government needs to make sure that there is gate access for rivals at airports, whether that means more common use gates or more federal money to add gates or whatever. It's worth promoting competition when there are competitors who want to compete. Fixing air traffic control, by the way, would be a huge financial help to JetBlue, which incurs large losses because of New York airspace congestion and restrictions, right? Remember, the government's been forcing airlines to trim schedules, not to mention the cost of delays and cancellations. So I think there's room for more than 4 big airlines in this country, but I don't think there's enough traffic for 9 big airlines in this country. The right number is somewhere in the middle. I don't know what it is, 6 or 7 perhaps. That's still a very competitive market. And as I said, when JetBlue was trying to buy Spirit, the whole argument was that we would all benefit from having a 5th big competitor in this country, not just the 4. And JetBlue needs to find a way somehow, or Alaska needs to find a way somehow to become that 5th big competitor. Or maybe it's Frontier. So to me, JetBlue sits in the sweet spot right now of higher quality service that people are willing to pay a premium for, right? They were out front on that long before others. I don't know. As Joanna Geraghty said, JetBlue needs to get bigger in order for it to be profitably competitive. Competition isn't enhanced if it gets swallowed up by United someday, but competition also isn't enhanced if the government won't allow smaller airlines to consolidate or grow. What do you think, Dave?
I agree with you, Scott, as I often do. I mean, competition is always good for the industry. I believe makes everybody better. It's obviously good for the consumers, which always the government wants. But, to be frank, that judge really screwed Spirit and JetBlue, in my opinion, on the merger deal. I know he was reveling in so I know we're talking about past history, but I don't know that I've ever really got it off my chest. The judge was so proud of himself of blocking that when I don't know how he didn't do a little more research and realize that was a failing enterprise. Doesn't mean it was an unsafe enterprise at Spirit or wasn't, doing good for a lot of people. It just, I don't know if he was a bankruptcy expert. I'm sure he was a fine judge, but I was so shocked about that. I really was. And I know I'm not privy to all the financials and the details at the time that ruling was made, but it didn't take an expert, in my personal opinion, to figure out that was a really good shot at Spirit making it. And you were right about Scott. I mean, maybe in the end that would have been a bad thing for JetBlue if they would have gone in, but they would have figured that stuff. They would have gone in and made all kinds of changes. I think that would have been, a good thing for JetBlue. A lot of scope, a lot of gates in a lot of places. I think they could have made it work. Now, my ultimate belief, and we probably chatted about it on one of our podcasts somewhere along the way, or you probably have with some other. I mean, is it not evident to everybody that, wouldn't an Alaska JetBlue merger make such perfect sense from product quality and the scope and the comprehensive nature of the route systems? I just have always thought that was the right way to go. I'm sure for whatever reason that one will never get done, but it just seems like there's good product quality on both sides. I know Alaska is just in the midst of finishing up its merger activities with Hawaiian and has a lot to absorb. But anyway, I'm always thinking the Alaska JetBlue merger would be ultimately one of the final ones. And then you have Spirit and Frontier finally get together. Everybody have a nice day. Have a nice day. Go home, tip your bartenders and waitresses. What a great industry. Those are my thoughts on the whole merger scenario, right? I mean, you talk about a brutally competitive but quality set of carriers. I know we've talked about in the past that just because the paint jobs go away doesn't mean the seats do. So there's still plenty of seats competing for a lot of customers. I think we're on the way to a great industry. I can't believe nobody's asked my opinion at Alaska or JetBlue. And I would have told them, just go ahead and get merged and married. You'll be all right.
Well, yeah, I talked to Ben a lot about this. And, Ben was on the JetBlue board. And I know his opinion was Spirit was a better fit, even though on the outset, everybody looked at it and said, oh, they're such different carriers that never fit together. Spirit's too cheap and planes are so dense and you have to change that. I mean, he thought JetBlue needed a little more density on its airplanes. JetBlue needed a little more Spirit, as it were, and Spirit needed more JetBlue or whatever. His concern about JetBlue Alaska, and I think this is real, is it's basically a barbell airline. You have West Coast on one, East Coast on the other, but you don't have much in the middle. And the attraction of Spirit to JetBlue was the middle of the country. It was Houston and Dallas and St. Louis and Chicago and, all of that. I mean, now Spirit's pulling out of, Milwaukee and places like that. But he really thought, and a lot of truth to this, I think, that you can't just be on the coast. You have to have the middle of the country. It's not just for feed and connections and all that. It's for aircraft utilization. And you can be much more efficient if that plane flies, New York, Seattle, but then flies to Chicago or something. And that's its day. It may not Anyway.
And that's a fair argument because I'm certainly not a scheduler and often use looking at all those utilization, the patterns. But I got to say, my belief is with those brands together and the ability to organically if you got those guys together, you could find a way to pluck off opportunities in the heartland. And granted, it's not like you're trying to stop into Chicago where there's already a good pissing match between, American United. There's a lot of other good size, cities with O&Ds where I think you could do real well, but just their brands. I mean, I just think back to the Continental days where you had Houston, Cleveland, and New York, still very profitable. We knew we were going to be marginalized over time. It's a network business. You got to be big, but man, I figured if we threw off the Guam hub there, we were, kind of a dumbbell looking thing. Maybe it was more of a U coming out of the country, but one way or the other, find a way to, survive, actually thrive. And, Alaska's done pretty well over all those years being relatively small, even though they realize they've had to get bigger. But you make a good point. And Ben, certainly that may be a good argument that it just can't be about the coast, but that's where a ton of money is. And Gordon used to always talk about, hey, fly where people want to go. And it would just seem to me that would be a great combination down the road.
Right.
Who knows?
Right. Well, what it really gets to is exactly what Joanna was just talking about in terms of gate access. Right. Yes. So if you put those two airlines together, well, then they got there's a lot of heft there, and sure, they need to get bigger in Chicago. Well, how do you do that? You need gates, and they're hard to come by at the two airports in Chicago. So it just raises the gate access issue. If there were more common use gates, if there was less squatting on gates by airlines that were not utilizing them, fully. If you got 4 flights a day, well, there's plenty of gates around the system of the Southwest running 10 flights a day. But
you're absolutely right. And I know there was the big, legal battle in Chicago for the gates, and that's tied to how much you utilize. And obviously United, like how that all came out, American, maybe not so much, but to be sure, I'm sure Chicago in the end wants just to keep building some more space there, more gates, because that the airport does better, the city does better, right?
But an interesting problem, because if gates get allocated based on traffic, well, it's a chicken and egg. You can't get more traffic without more gates. So
no question. But
stuck.
I think, but Scott, you brought ultimately like these airports, and I know it's not maybe that easy at O'Hare, although they have pretty extraordinary set of runways these days. A lot of buffing up has occurred there. That, you got to find you have to put another wing out there, right? Build another, gate where you got 6 or 8 more gates, obviously, and see if folks will soak them up. I got to believe there are places where there is some expansion available. So, I guess we'll see what's happening over time in that. But always more gates, generally better speaking for consumers and ultimately the airlines to use them. Hey, and one thing that continues to be a challenge, and I know it since I used to do so much international travel. Well, still do today, commuting down to Australia. What's not helping any of the big airlines is the continuing decline of inbound foreign visitors to the United States. And I did note that there were new numbers on this now that the government shutdown is over. I guess the guys got back to compiling the numbers. But in September, the National Travel and Tourism Office said inbound visitors were nearly 8% lower than a year ago. That was the biggest drop since last March, when the tariff and immigration issues were front and center. Now, I will say I did see just this past week that there was new legislation introduced, the Visit USA Act. It was introduced, I think, last Wednesday, and it was basically restoring. It's this legislation, assuming it passes, and that's a big if, would restore the critical funding to Brand USA, which is America's destination marketing organization, because we need to be promoting, marketing, advertising around the world. People need to come to the United States, right? Whatever they're doing, the big events, the FIFA World Cup, the American 250, and of course the Summer Olympics, those are natural draws anyway. But we need to get more people flying to the United States, staying here, spending their money with all the great businesses. Obviously, it's good for tax revenues. Anyway, I was encouraged to see that legislation introduced. It's bipartisan. Jeff Freeman, as you probably know, is the president and CEO of the U.S. Travel Association, really sharp guy. Bottom line is Brand USA does a good job. They need that funding. We need to get more people flying from around the world to the United States. And we know there's a number of reasons why some of those things have been constrained, but it's time, don't you think, Scott?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And as you said, it's not just benefiting the airline industry, but hotels and restaurants and clothing stores and everything else.
Absolutely.
It's hugely important. And that 8% drop, that's a concern. That's a red flag. That's going to affect the economy in general. It's going to affect employment.
Oh, that's flashing red lights. Yeah. I mean, that's 8% is such a material number in terms. I mean, when you talk about, international visitors coming into the States, it's just, and we're talking legal. We're talking legal visitation to the United States.
Right.
I mean, this is, it's critical for our businesses, absolutely beyond just the airline industry. So anyway, I sure hope Congress, when that bipartisan effort, I hope they pass that famous Visit USA Act, and good luck to Jeff Freeman and all the folks at the U.S. Travel Association getting that one passed through.
Yeah, good. No, thanks for bringing that up. So Dave, the other big news of the week was the National Transportation Safety Board issued a preliminary report on the crash of UPS Flight 2976 in Louisville on November 4th, along with the clearest and most dramatic photos we've seen yet. I'm sure listeners saw the photos. The photos show the whole left engine separating from the wing and peeling back across the top of the wing. Fire ignited in the area where the left pylon separated from the wing. As we knew before, the pylon separated with the engine. The engine didn't detach from the pylon. The aircraft never got more than 30 feet above the ground, the NTSB said, according to data from the flight data recorder. NTSB said it found evidence of fatigue cracks in addition to areas of overstress failure in parts of the pylon assembly. We'll obviously know a lot more when the final report gets issued. This report indicates that a visual inspection of the pylon mount was last done on schedule about 4 years ago. That really surprised me, that it wasn't due for another inspection for another 2 years, that you would, something that critical, something that where the stresses are so great, to inspect it once every 6 years. I don't know. I'm by no means a maintenance expert or a metals expert or anything else. But it was a 6-year interval according to UPS's maintenance program, which, by the way, gets approved and it comes from the manufacturer or adopted, but certainly approved by the FAA. Lubrication in the area was done on schedule just over 2 weeks before the crash. A detailed inspection of the pylon wasn't due for another 8,000 cycles or so. So my guess is there will be recommendations to increase the frequency of pylon inspections before the MD-11 is ever cleared to fly again.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. And it's just such a terrible accident. And as always, flying does get safer because of what we learn from these tragedies. It just, I know everybody in this industry, when they see something like that, it just, your heart stops and you just can't believe it. But you just hope that none of that was in vain and it will get better. And, everybody wants to be better and find, ways to avoid that ever happening again. And I know that's going to be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I want to take a moment now to thank our sponsors for making this podcast possible. Thanks to Ontario International Airport for its support. Ontario International Airport is celebrating a decade of local control. Thanks to public support, the local community reclaimed ONT, reviving it as a vital gateway in Southern California and ensuring the airport is ready to soar even higher in the years to come. Visit flyontario.com/10 to learn the story and find out how you can join the year-long celebration of how a decade of local control has turned Ontario into one of California's fastest growing and most economical airports. And thanks to Pratt & Whitney for its longtime sponsorship of Airlines Confidential. At Pratt & Whitney, the pursuit of more sustainable aviation is foundational. For decades, Pratt & Whitney has been at the forefront of revolutionary advancements in aircraft propulsion technology. And by working smarter, cleaner, and greener today, they're committed to supporting the aviation industry in its goal of reaching net zero CO2 emissions by 2050. Learn more about Pratt & Whitney's smarter technology, cleaner fuel, and greener business at prattwhitney.com.
And Scott, you know how much I love these commercial plugs because I get to use my radio voice, which I thoroughly enjoy. So in addition to those fabulous sponsors, Ontario International Airport and Pratt & Whitney, we also want to thank our good friends at Infinity Flight Academy, the leader in cadet academy training programs. So whether you're building a custom pipeline or strengthening your existing cadet program, Infinity Flight Academy delivers consistent airline-ready results. And for those of you listening who've always dreamed of flying, or know someone who has, or know someone that just is very excited to get in the business, Infinity Flight has trained thousands of students, many now who are flying for major airlines around the world. Learn more at infinityflight.com, Infinity Flight Academy, where future airline pilots take off.
Look, it's, as we know, it's a great career. I mean, I heard there were a couple of Southwest guys who, pushing it right up to 1,000 hours, had W-2s that showed $1 million. I mean, you can.
How beautiful is that?
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's great. It is amazing. And, you get rewarded for hard work, but what a great career. See the world, all kinds of challenges if you have the right aptitude for it. It is, fun. And, they hand you the keys to there aren't keys, but hand you a, $300 million machine to go fly. And that's a whole lot more fun than the Cessna 172.
It is such an incredible profession and a career opportunity. So it really, anybody listening out there, and Scott and I are really hoping that, in addition to football, then everybody's got to be watching football, whether it's American style or if you're in Europe listening to this, you're watching your soccer, that beyond that, you're listening to Airlines Confidential. This should become a new family tradition during Thanksgiving. We want you to do your football thing, but then put this on, the whole family enjoy it, and the kids. They should be inspired to do their pilot thing. Get in, get trained, and best wishes to everybody. Go see the folks in Infinity Flight Academy. And finally, our good friends at Cirium, because I know Cirium offers the most accurate and precise data and analytics to enable airlines to optimize planning, operations, passenger services, and salaries to the pilots of close to $1 million. The right intelligence drives operational efficiencies, enables you to predict market shifts, and help airlines respond quickly to maximize revenue, manage cost, and seize commercial opportunities. So to our friends at Cirium.com, well done, doing a great job. Everybody out there, visit Cirium.com for more information.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dave, I want to take a moment to pay respects to Peter Dolara. Peter was a legendary figure in this business who passed away last week. Peter Dolara shaped and built Americans' presence in Latin America, the Miami hub, the alliances with other carriers, the relationships with political and business leaders throughout the region that won American traffic rights and major customers. He helped drive the 1990 acquisition of Eastern routes in Central and South America, and he turned it into a profit powerhouse for American. He was known to his employees as El Jefe. He was a quiet man whose actions spoke loudly, always dignified and dapper. I had the pleasure of interviewing him many times over the years. Always a fascinating guy. Peter Dolara was 87 years old.
And Scott, that's so beautiful about Peter Dolara. I met Peter when I was in New York City sales with Eastern and Continental Eastern sales, actually. It's kind of late 87, 88, 89. Peter Dolara, he was a legendary, literally 40 some years ago, right? He was the man. I mean, talking with travel agents or any corporate travel managers, when I'm going in along with my teammates, we, trying to earn some share here and there from American and Delta and United. I mean, they were always open to talking about, but they said, we can never move any market share off of American Airlines, or we would face the wrath of Peter Dolara. And
Yeah.
I know he loved that because obviously
Yeah.
he was, he was so bright and very charismatic, even if he was quiet in his own way. I mean, man, was he a good looking guy. The swagger, I mean, again, I used to do a lab nights, like people were in fear of him, probably in the most respectful way, because they needed American in New York City and they respected him, loved him, and feared him. And what else could you ask in business? And American was obviously blessed. And I know that team at American loved him, so appreciated his talents, and obviously sad to hear about his passing, but he had obviously a long and great life. And, he made a difference in people's lives. And what else could you ask?
Yeah, no, and it's really, American was so dominant for a while there, and it was in South America.
He moved from New York down to Miami because he was gonna, right? It was all about the acquisition, the Eastern routes, and they did a beautiful job in that. I wasn't happy about it because those were such great routes, but it happened, and they did amazing things. And yeah, Peter Dolara is definitely part of that legendary story. And I did see it as service. They had, Bob Crandall was there, and I know a bunch of the other former CEOs I recognized in there, and a lot of team members who are now at other airlines that went back to pay their respects. So yeah, what a legend.
Yeah, yeah. We will be right back with more on Airlines Confidential.
Promotional support provided by the ultimate AvGeek website, thearchive.net. A vast collection of airline memorabilia, timetables, route maps, rare cabin and airport photos, special flights, and more. All at thearchive.net, the hub of air transport history.
Well, Dave, in the mailbag this week was a quick instant reaction to my interview last week with United Airlines CEO Scott Kirby. The interview made some headlines with Scott's comments about a weakening American Airlines and other topics. Ed from Salt Lake City responded to it with this: "Thanks for having Scott on. I feel like we always get the same Scott no matter what," and this is Scott Kirby, "always get the same Scott no matter what venue he is interviewed in. I wished you had pushed back on his bombastic claims that United is the best network, the best employees, the best at O'Hare, etc. I felt like your show gave him a platform to say what he always sells, the brand of Scott Kirby. He comes off very braggadocious. There is plenty United still needs to figure out, starting with the flight attendant contract that they can't seem to pin down. That is a clear cost advantage UAL has versus American and Delta. I get it. He's a guest. You need to play nice in the sandbox. So perhaps you should have Doug Parker back on. And I love when he is on, so he can offer some kind retorts to Scott's claim. Love the podcast. Keep up the good work." So thanks for the comment, Ed, and I appreciate the interviewing suggestions. Doug Parker will be back on in 2 weeks, though I'm pretty sure he doesn't have much interest in engaging in Scott's brashness. I'll just say I love that we get all sides on the podcast, including Scott Kirby's point of view, which I think is very important for the industry. He is, as I said during the interview, major figure right now in the industry. And I think it's important for listeners to not only hear his insights, but also, hear his boldness. So I do have one concern in all this, and I'm really curious about your point of view on, Dave. We've heard Doug talk about the point differential in Americans' earnings, the deficit to United and Delta, which stems significantly from the costly corporate travel blunder that American made, $2 billion in lost revenue, sent large accounts to rivals, namely United and Delta. We've also heard from Doug and Maya about the good that American has, strong network, principally centered on Dallas and Charlotte, but prospects for long-term success, great partners worldwide, important transatlantic alliance with British Air and others. But what we don't hear is direct pushback from American itself. And more significantly, not just the war of words, but where's the competitive response from American? I kind of feel like United is kicking sand in Americans' face, not just with Scott's comments, but with new flights taking customers away from American. And where's the response? I don't know. Americans playing catch up with its product improvements. We've heard about some of that, and that's good. Americans trying to rebuild its corporate sales effort, and some new hires there. That's good, but it still hasn't caught up to United or Delta in reliability. And you just don't see the innovation anymore. I don't know. Where's the marketing or the branding effort? Where's the urgency or the fight? Am I wrong about that, or is there something Americans should be doing, or maybe it's not worth engaging in a costly market share battle that's just going to hurt everybody's earnings?
Well, it makes some great observations, and first off, I think they lost some of their best fighters, at least on the sales side of the house. That's just because I've known so many folks at American, and this is not beat on American Day. I just have tremendous respect for them and the enterprise and the legacy of that carrier and ultimately, but I mean, when they lost like Allison Taylor, Hank Benedetti, Lisa Elberwine, right, and Corp, there were some amazing folks who were very out in the public talking about all the good things that they were doing, even in the midst of maybe when they weren't doing that great of things. They just had great people out there. Now, I'm not saying they don't still have those folks, but it almost feels a little bit to me like they've lost some of their confidence, which I can appreciate because they have made some missteps, and so they're having to come back. But I never underestimate American Airlines. I just don't. Even though they lag behind in some areas, and clearly I think their network, compared to my alumni airline, I just don't know that they'll ever have that good a network. I don't think anybody does, but I know I'm biased about that. But I think American, with the investments they're making, obviously with the focus, they know they have enormous heat, right, from the investment community, from their own customers, from their employees. They want to be proud. They want to be winners. I know they win in some areas bigger than others, but they obviously have to keep fighting and getting back to where, ultimately trying to get back to where United and Delta, now those guys kind of set the standard, but American knows where that is. Now, whether they get there or not, it's probably up to them. But one of the things I think is critical for American, and I'm sure they've heard this, and maybe it's just their style. I know, Scott, you talked about, their CEO, Robert, is a very quiet, thoughtful guy. Maybe he doesn't like some of that bold style that we would know with some of the other CEOs, but you got to relentlessly promote your strength. Be candid about where you've fallen a little bit short and what you're doing to fix it. And you got to be highly visible everywhere. And I just know some of that. Listen, when I was at Continental, I mean, we were the fifth largest carrier in the United States. I'm talking back in the mid 90s. And we always had the confidence, maybe even misplaced, but when we started to turn things around, and the famous Gordon's from worst to first, is we were a small carrier, but we talked about all those things to be focused. It's just the basics, and if you do the basics right, and then keep making those incremental ads, and you've got the right people out, marketing, talking about. I mean, I was on the road on average for 300 days a year, and granted, that was my gig in marketing and sales, but if you get the right people out there talking about those things, doing the interviews, I mean, you got to do all those things. It makes a difference. And I know Mr. Kirby even talked about it, right? You ask him about being a CEO. He is out front and center talking with anybody and everybody, investors, customers, business partners, government, you name it, which ultimately gets back to its employees. And they feel good that you're out there making that happen. So, right. Scott, I'm just one small opinion in all this, but I had to do it at Continental. We did it at United when we merged. Obviously, we were huge from a network perspective, but it was kind of a bumpy start to that merger. But we never ducked, and we weren't quiet. We were out talking about things. We acknowledged our issues, and we pushed really forward on all the things we were doing to benefit our customers, our investors, our employees, and ultimately, you got a winning hand. And I think that I know this is basic stuff, but I don't know that if Americans always understanding, they need to be more aggressive in a lot of what they're doing in the marketing and sales front. But hey, one day maybe they'll they'll make it happen. I'm sure they'll enjoy success. Your thoughts?
But no, that's a really interesting analogy. I hadn't really thought of it that way, but once you guys fixed Continental, that's when you got really aggressive. I mean, one of my favorite things of all time was the taxi tops in New York that it said something like, "What would you be if you flew from JFK? Late." Right. And it was to promote Newark because that was Continental's hub. And so, you fly out of JFK, you'd be late. And that was bold. And, I'm not saying you have to go all, Ben Baldanza crazy marketing, really pushing the envelope to get attention, to get free publicity, although certainly worked for Ben. I just think, there needs to be, and this is, I always go back to the football coach analogy, there need to be some victories and you need to herald them and you need to get your employees, engaged in the fight. It is, day in and day out, really hand-to-hand combat in this industry. It's a very competitive industry. And, I saw Herb Kelleher time after time after time, literally put on, battle fatigues and stand in front with his helmet on, stand in front of the troops and say, "We're at war with United in California. We're at war with whatever." I'm not sure that works today, but there has to be some equivalent, or at least some social media or something, to get people excited and reclaim some of the lost ground that has happened.
The lost ground and the glory. And I know both you and I know, Scott, you got a lot of folks who either work for American currently or maybe were working in American. I mean, listen, we know they recognize some of the challenges and they got to be working hard. They want to win. Sure. They want to do well. I just flew American. I bought a ticket from Puerto Vallarta to Phoenix. And they did a fine job. I mean, they obviously have some really nice equipment. Their people want to win, and they can. They got tough challengers in United and Delta and all the other fine carriers out there who maybe are a little farther down the highway or, have a better PR profile. But bottom line is you can't count American out. And I'm sure if they get, they keep making incremental progress, they will provide plenty of competition for everybody else. I'm rooting for the whole industry. Of course, I love my United group, but I want the whole industry to do well. And American, they dug a bit of a hole, but I'm sure they're going to make their way out. So I know we wish them good luck, especially in this time of year where we want everybody to do well.
Absolutely. All right. More to come on this topic, no doubt. Thank you so much, Dave Hilfman, as always. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Have a great Thanksgiving. Next week, Charles Duncan will be here and we'll talk to Phil Washington, the CEO of Denver International Airport, who has the very interesting and no doubt challenging job of keeping 3 airlines happy, all trying to hub at his airport, which is one of the most competitive and fastest growing of big airports in the country. So,
and by the way, isn't it the free tours of the underground tunnel and the big blue Mustang with the red eyes or something, Scott? Make sure Charles asked Mr. Washington about all that, will you?
The horse is a little creepy, but...
Well, hey, I wanted to say thank you again, Scott, for allowing me the privilege to co-host with you from time to time. And so long, everyone. Just have a wonderful Thanksgiving week. Make sure you turn us on during game day, and look forward to seeing you down the road.
So long for now. Thanks.
This podcast is produced by Mass Media. Info@massmedia.net.